This is Raday here, author of the esteemed book. What's that? We're gonna come in from the side this time. That's gonna be Stand to Reason. Blacks in the Bible. and we're getting into a chapter, pretty much into a section that I'm really excited about. This is a section that the whole book has been leading up to. And, this is pretty much the part where all this good stuff that I'm telling you about the Bible or whatever, this is the part where I take it back to Africa, pretty much using just the Bible. A lot of people have a lot of claims. They really came from here, or they really did this and that, and they got to show all these other sources and everything like that. I'm going to take you right into the Bible, and show you, that a lot of this stuff that we're all talking about, it comes right from Africa, right from Egypt, which is in Africa. So without any further ado, let's get into it. This is chapter 15. Is it really an Israelite? So, in the introduction to this, I say the Egyptians in the Bible are the ones that are compared with the Israelites. When we look close and hard, we're gonna see that the Israelites, they're compared to African people all the time, Ethiopians, Egyptians, all that other good stuff. And this is going to be pretty much the summation of all that other good stuff. So we're getting into the first section, which is super breed. When the Israelites went into Egypt, they started with 77 people. When they left, they had about it says 600,000 fighting men afoot. And when we talk about that, that's just the men. So when we talk about women and children and everything of that sort, it could easily come to about 2 to 3 million people. And I gauge that within a 400-year span, a lot of that time being subjugated and with apparent genocide attempts. That's how Moses got to be Moses. Um, it's one of those things where in order to leave with that amount of people, you're gonna need some help. You're gonna be interbreeding whatever with Egyptians, and also there's gonna be some leaving with you. And there's some people that say, well, that can't happen because the Egyptians saw the Israelites as abominations. And it's recorded. It's recorded a couple of times in Genesis. Matter of fact, I'll give you the verses for Genesis 43:32, Genesis 46:34. Those are the ones I could find. Um, but here's the thing, right? One thing that we know about beautiful black people is that we're just irresistible. Right? The Bible says that when we look at Joseph, he was all but irresistible to Potiphar's wife. And when he got into Egypt, yes, he's an Israelite or whatever, he's an abomination or whatever, but yet somehow the Pharaoh thought that it was appropriate to give him a wife, right? An Egyptian wife. And not only that, right? Because in Egypt they have gods and goddesses, they have priestesses. The women in African culture, typically, I'll say ancient African culture, um, are right on par with men. Even when you look at a lot of the Egyptian statues or whatever, there's not, the man and then the woman or whatever. They're both equal. You know, um, so she would have a lot of, especially being this high up in the ranks or whatever. She would have to be this high up. She'd have to be high enough to where if she didn't really want to do this marriage, she probably wouldn't have had to, but went through with it anyway. Matter of fact, if we go into some of the texts that were left out of the Bible, there's actually a story where she loves Joseph. Joseph doesn't even like her, but she loves him, and she's willing to convert or do some other stuff just to be with him. But and there's other issues, in regards to mixing and everything throughout the Bible. Matter of fact, even when we look at Solomon, Solomon was married to Pharaoh's daughter. So it's one of those things where even in captivity they were intermingling. After captivity they were intermingling. Like these people just can't seem to stay away from each other. And we see this, we kind of see this in latter times. Um, I mean, just look at slavery, right? I mean, when we look at a lot of the slave masters or whatever, I mean, yeah, I mean they saw black people as chattel, not even humans, like three-fifths of a person, but at the same time that didn't stop any if a slave master wanted to rape a slave or whatever, it got done. If a mistress or whatever wanted to have her a young strong black buck, well then she got one. I mean, it's just that's the way it is. But along those lines, we read in Exodus 12:38 that the Israelites came out of Egypt in a mixed multitude. Well, let's see, we have Israelites. They're in Egypt. So who else would they be coming out with? Probably Egyptians. Am I correct? So that mixed multitude is Israelite and Egyptians coming out of Egypt. And even then, when we look later on, let me get the verse for you. It's Leviticus 19:27. It also states that no. Excuse me. Leviticus 24:10. There's a story about a male who excuse me, a man who had an Israelite mother and an Egyptian father. So, we can already see that Egyptians, even after the Exodus, even when Israel is into their stuff, that the Egyptians and Israel are one and the same. you know. And another thing, when I talk about, how the Egyptians look, we know that they were a smooth-skinned people. But it's also said that the Israelites were to wear beards. If we look at Leviticus 19:27, and when we see that, yeah, you really ask, well, why is that? A lot of people say they have a lot of different reasons or whatever. Um, my main reason that I'd say is that if the Egyptians and the Israelites essentially look the same, they were essentially the same people, then you're going to need some sort of way to distinguish the two. And if the Egyptians are known to shave and smooth skinned or whatever, if that's their thing, if that's their custom or whatever, then to distinguish yourself as far as facials is concerned, you get yourself a beard. You grow yourself a beard. So there's a little bit about that, but yeah, I said, even after the Exodus, Solomon married Pharaoh's daughter to establish an alliance with Egypt. Um, and then let's see, it's also written that the Pharaoh of the Egyptian the Pharaoh of his father-in-law, Jesus, conquered part of Israel that was still occupied by the Canaanites, and gave it to him as a present. So now we're seeing, they're marrying, they're exchanging favors, but we're gonna get into that a little bit later. Um, let's see, and I put even in the dark times, right? Because there's an instance where King Shishak, um, went up and plundered Judah. Now, at this time, Israel and Judah, has split up, and Judah being to the south. So, there's a time where it was recorded where Egypt goes up and plunders them or whatever, and comes back down. But that was seen as more of a, I don't know. I put in here like a big brother act. Judah wasn't acting right, so God sent oh boy Shishak up there to set him straight. Um, let's see, anything else I'm missing? But so we know that they spent a lot of time together, as far as being in Israel, as far as being in Egypt. But there's also another time when the two have been found together. Um, I put here the Bible describes yet another time these two would occupy the same space for an extended amount of time. This is because of Israel's iniquities. They were to be captured by King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon. Now, when we look at this, we could the whole book of Daniel is dedicated to this. So I'm not going to go into that, but pretty much Egypt had the same exact fate. Let me read it for you. Uh, it could be found in give me a minute, Ezekiel 29:19. Therefore, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will give thee the land of Egypt into Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and he shall take her multitude. So here we go. They spent, I mean, here we go. Now they're in captivity. And if there's one thing that going through some hardships does to people, it's bring them closer together, especially shared hardship. What's that term? Misery loves company. Well, these two people are pretty miserable. And I put here, they spent over 400 years joined together in Egypt. 500 years in very good standing with each other, and now they're spending all this other time, um, imprisoned with each other. It's safe to say that over time they've pretty much um, assimilated, or they're pretty much the same type of people. So, with that, we're going to go into the next section, which is God's people, Egyptians. I'm going to read a verse for you. It's Hosea 12:9. It states, I am the Lord God, thy God from the land of Egypt. Now, normally, it would say something like, I am the Lord thy God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, but this one says that I am the God from the land of Egypt. And some people say, well, that's interpretation. That's just, I mean, even though despite all the other evidence that I'm giving here, they'll still say, well, that's interpretation. Don't worry, I got something for you. Obviously, as the road that I'm going down is God's origin um, before Israel, as it were. It was in Egypt. Um, so along these lines, right? And I don't want to be I don't want to be guilty of what the Romans and everybody else or Greeks or whatever are accused of, and trying to monopolize God. Because it does say, in Romans, I believe 1:18 through 23, that God revealed himself to everybody. God, and even then, there's another verse that says God is no respecter of persons or whatever. Like, God revealed himself or itself, herself to everybody. It's just, for what it's worth, I guess as far as the Bible is concerned, people started messing up. So, um, but with that, we're going to go down into a prophecy written about Egypt. And it's found in Isaiah 19:25. Whom the Lord of hosts shall bless, saying, blessed be Egypt, my people. So here we're talking about God calling Egypt his people. Okay, I mean, I guess we'll get back to that. I mean, we still got a lot more to cover. Um, if you go to Second Chronicles 35, you'll see, um, you'll read about a king called Josiah, and pretty much Josiah, he was a good king, pleased God, all this other stuff. And the story goes that King Necho of Egypt, needed to pass through Israel to go to the north to assist the king of Assyria, but he had to go through Israel, and so, or Judah or whatever. And so he's going up, and he pretty much he's asking Josiah for he sent a messenger, asked Josiah for permission. Josiah said, no, sorry, not happening. And this is pretty much what followed. This is pretty much what King Necho sent to Judah. What do you want with me, King of Judah? I have no quarrel with you today. I was on my way to fight another nation, and God has told me to hurry. Do not interfere with God, who is with me, or he will destroy you. Now, the first thing to note is that People say, well, the Egyptians, they were, they believed in many gods and all this other kind of good stuff. And I mean, here in the Bible, right, we see that they believed in one God, right? He didn't say, don't interfere with gods or they will destroy you. He said, no, don't interfere with God or he will destroy you. But we'll get into that a little bit later. Um, and what we notice here is that the is that God is on Egypt's side against Israel. Well, not necessarily against Israel, but is on Egypt's side much more than, I guess, he's rooting for old boy Israel over here, old boy Judah. And pretty much the aftermath of that is Josiah marched his army down and just got whooped. He got little brothered. He got whooped, and he died that day. Now it's interesting to note why Josiah died. He didn't die because he's one of the bad kings, because they've had a string of bad kings. I mean, just go through the books of Chronicles and Kings. They'll tell you king after king after king. God hated him, hate this dude, set up an idol, did this, did that, da 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 da. And he was one of the good ones, but you know, just overstepped his boundaries when it came to God in Egypt right now, and that's what happens. Um, but it doesn't stop there. If we go to Isaiah 19:13, it says, "The officials of Zon are fools, and official of Memphis, Noph, are deluded. The leaders of the people have led Egypt astray." So, I mean, ask yourself, they've been led astray. But if they were never on the right path to begin with, what are they being led astray from? Can you tell me? I mean, what are they being led astray? If they've always been heathens and they've always been these people that have just been so evil, what have they been led astray from? I mean, wouldn't that be expected? I mean, if they were never God's people, all right, I'll just I'll leave it at that. God even pleads with Egypt the same, right? And here's the thing: there are many times throughout the Bible where God is pleading with Israel, like, look, just stop messing up, come on back, quit the bullshit, just come on back, just come on, man, come on, come on, come on. And we're starting to see the same thing here. And the Bible states, and so um, I will punish Egypt, and they will know that I am the Lord. I mean, and it's the same thing. I'm gonna punish Israel. I'm gonna punish them so they'll know that I'm God. Well, it's like I can understand why God is so mad with Israel or Judah or whatever, the Jews or whatever, because that's supposed to be his people. And if that's his people and they're messing up, of course he's gonna be mad. He's gonna punish them. And it's the same thing. And I will punish Egypt. They will know that I'm the. And it's like, you get it? Like, why is God so angry with these people? You know. Um. Let's see. But I guess one thing that I wanted to point out is the cycle. God chooses a people, they get sidetracked from their duties. He punished them to show he's God, and it's like a continuous cycle. You know, which will lead me to my next section, which is Western Asian persuasion. And pretty much, I wanted to, I don't want to make it seem like um, everything, because I know there's some people out there like, well, not everything came from Africa, and not everything, and some stuff came, and then all right. So this is kind of like, I guess, the appeasement section. Um, let's see. There are, he does call Assyria the work of his, God does call Assyria the work of his hands. There are times, King Nebuchadnezzar acknowledges Israel's God or whatever as the one true God. And I put in here would be the current Hebrew alphabet when it came from Babylon. But if you read the book, The Secrets of the Exodus, um, I gotta say, I gotta retract this particular statement in the book. That's not true, um, because they've literally done a thing where they take pretty much every Hebrew character and place it with like an Egyptian hieroglyph and show you how it got its shape and everything like that. It's a pretty deep book. Secrets of the Exodus. I'm getting into it now. I'm learning. I'm still learning. So excuse me. But with that, we're gonna get into the next section, which is Good Pharaoh. Um, let's see. But when we look at Israel, we can tell that obviously being God's people or whatever, he's supposed to be the people who he's supposed to show his power through. This is supposed to be like his representation on earth. And a point I want to get across is in it's found in Romans 9:17, Exodus 9:16. For the scriptures say that God told Pharaoh, I have appointed you for every purpose of displaying my power in you and spread my fame throughout the earth. You might have some different interpretations or whatever about it, but we know that this Pharaoh, the Pharaoh was chosen to be that instrument through which God displays His power. And some people are like, well, God had pretty much bullied Pharaoh, and that's supposed to be the instrument of God's powers by, Pharaoh, you think you're so tough, but I'm gonna bully you, show you that I'm more powerful. That's supposed to be the thing. But I'm on the latter side, and I come with a lot more references. And when we put them all together, we're gonna see how it all fits. And even then, when we talk about the people, when we talk about the people themselves, many Egyptian people held themselves in high esteem. Um, Obviously, look, when we talk about, gods and goddesses, there weren't women who felt that they were lower by any means. Um, Gods, goddesses, priestesses, all this other good stuff. Like, people really felt that, um, they really had this connection to God. But, obviously, being a pharaoh, you're like the king, priest, guy, like you're like the head honcho. But the people didn't just see themselves as slouches in that regard anyway. And when we read Psalms 82:6, it says, I have said ye are gods, and all of you are children of the Most High. And Jesus actually tells us the same thing as well in, I believe, John 10:34 or whatever. So that's what that is. um and many Bible scholars, they want to come along and say that Ramses was the pharaoh of the Exodus. And I guess it's a wise assumption, and I'm not detracting from it. His name is mentioned like 4 times or whatever in the Bible. I think I give you all 4 of those times. But um if we want to take Ramses as the pharaoh of Egypt that was responsible for the Exodus, then it's also important to note what his real Egyptian name really was. Now, here's where I'm going to diverge for a little bit. And I know I said, it's all coming from but this is one of the few times that I'm actually going to drop something on you that's not found directly in the Bible. But his real name is Asur Ma'at Ra Septepen Ra Ramesu Miriamin. And when we break his name down, I break it down for you. But Asur Ma'at Ra, son of the truth, justice, and righteousness of God. Septepen Ra, Septepen Ramesu, chosen by God. Miriamin, beloved by God. Now, if we look at this thing, you know, um, if you're supposed to be God's chosen people, if you're supposed to be the representatives of God, then you are the sons and daughters of truth, justice, righteousness, all that good stuff. Obviously, you're chosen by God. You're beloved by God. Like everything that this man's name stands for is the same that these Israelites are supposed to exude. Um, and there's a lot more I could say about this, a lot more I want to say. There's many books on this. Like I said, if you want a good place to go for this type of knowledge, Secrets of the Exodus. But this is kind of like, even then, I know this is a lot of good stuff, but it's like a lot of bottom level stuff too. So, and right now we're gonna get into another section, God's anger and worldwide dispersal. Um, Pretty much, long story short, if Israel had clues, excuse me, if Israel had marks, so does Egypt. And I'm going to show you them right now. And obviously, one of them is worldwide dispersal for not being in alignment with God's will. Um, it has been established that God was very upset with the two of them on the grounds of leadership and idolatry, among other things. And now we're going to focus on the punishments. Let's see. When we go to Ezekiel 30:26, it says, I will scatter the Egyptians among the nations, dispersing them throughout the earth. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel 30:17, the young men of Avon and Pibeseth shall fall by the sword, and these cities shall go into captivity. And it also says that I am, and the Egyptians I will give over to a cruel lord, and the fierce king shall rule over them. Thus saith the Lord of hosts. I mean, here we go. The fierce king, the cruel lord, throughout the earth, dispersing them. We're seeing a lot of the same patterns. Um, and some may argue that this is already taken care of with the Babylonian captivity that we talked about earlier. And I'll read this for you. Jeremiah 46:26 states, And I will deliver them unto the hand of those that seeks their lives, into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of his servants. And afterward it shall be inhabited as the days of old, saith the Lord. Right? So pretty much they're gonna go to Babylonian captivity. They're gonna come back, and it's just gonna be peachy, right? But I'll address that a little bit later. Um, but even then, one of the things that I can say is that there, when we go back to one of the previous verses, it says that they're going to be scattered all along, throughout the world. And Babylon, although is I guess far from Egypt, it's relatively a lofty walk in comparison to the rest of the world. So there's that. But we're going to get into the next section, which is same tongue. And pretty much it says that I probably should have put this section before, but that they're all going to be speaking the same language. Isaiah 19:18 says, In that day 5 of Egypt's cities will follow the Lord of heaven's armies. They will then begin to speak Hebrew, the language of Canaan. Um, and then I go on a little rant here about saying that Canaanites were originally black and then they turn white, and then it's really an African language. First of all, the Canaanite language, the Hebrew language, is actually an African language as well. But when we look at, it says that they will be speaking Hebrew. Now, the interpretation, that I'm just throwing this out there, that I feel that should go best along with this, is actually just same language. They will be speaking the same language. And because, like I said, it's a book of prophecy. So when you're writing this prophecy, in Isaiah, like when Isaiah is writing this prophecy, he's writing this for a future time. So an indeterminate future time. So when we look at that, obviously him being a Jew, and he speaks Hebrew, he's not, obviously, some languages haven't even come about yet. He didn't know that there would be English or French or Portuguese, Spanish, or whatever, all these other languages that people are now speaking today. But at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter whether it's Hebrew or not. At the end of the day, they're all going to be speaking the same language. They've been captive together, all this other good stuff. Now they're going to be speaking the same language. So we're going to get on to the next section, which is lost identity. Pretty much when a person is separated from their home for an extended period of time, they lose their true sense of identity with their homeland over the course of time. Now, this is pretty much one of those things where it's I don't know, it's a mark that's kind of guilty. It's kind of guilty by association, if you and I said it. It's scattered all throughout. Over time, you're not going to remember who you really were, or your roots, or what have you. Um, And here's another section, a part I want to get into. I guess one of the real reasons why I put this here is to kind of address some of the Hebrew Israelite concerns. One person, I remember talking to a guy, and he says that, yes, it is true. He admitted it, that the Israelites and Jews were scattered all over, and a part of where they were scattered was in West Africa, where the slave trade took place. And then he said, well, that's part of the enslavement was, we went to West Africa, they took us, not any of the other Africans. They took us, as far as the Israelites, and shifted us over. Didn't even mention anybody else. And they said that, they, and the reason why is because, Africans, they do all this crazy stuff, right? They put lip rings and all this other good stuff. Some of that stuff is customary. Some of that stuff was done to permanently disfigure themselves, as to look undesirable, as to not be um, taken captive into slavery. And they said, well, we didn't partake in any of that. So as Israelites, they took us because we looked better or whatever, and left all the Africans there. And because of that, we're Israelites, we're not Africans. I don't want to go into the whole thing, but my objection to that is this: if you couldn't follow the customs, the rules, regulations, what have you, in your own land, how are you going to do that in someone else's land? You know what I'm saying? Like, how are you going to all of a sudden become this righteous and holy people? You didn't do it with the Greeks. You didn't do it with the Romans. You didn't do it with the Babylonians. You didn't do it with any of these other people who look nothing like you. So now you go to a foreign land with foreign customs, but people who look exactly like you, and pretty much do as you do, say as you say. If you research a lot of African religions, West African religions, it's pretty much a lot of the same stuff, And you're telling me you didn't partake? The whole reason why you're in West Africa to begin with was because you couldn't follow the rules. So yeah, you got shipped in with everybody else. And if you do a little bit of research on Egypt and everything, and when Egypt got, kind of, I'll say, culturally dismantled, a lot of the people moved west as well. But that's, just do a little bit of research on it. And I put, yes, there were tribes that didn't conduct themselves in that manner. But you can't say with any certainty that it was the Hebrews or it was the Israelites that didn't do any of that stuff. You got to provide me with some evidence. I want to see some. If you can show me some biblical evidence, that'd be top notch. But if you can provide me some actual written stuff, not just hearsay, this is what so and so told me, and give me some documentation and everything like that, I'd love to read it. I'd love to read it. I was gonna be in anthropology. I'd love to read this stuff, and I'd love to get to the source of this whole thing. But we're gonna go on to the next section, which is proverb. Pretty much they were going to be made a proverb. Now, obviously, when you get separated from your land, you go to different places or whatever, you're kind of subject to whatever they call you. But even then, when we look in the Bible, Egypt was already a byword. We're gonna go into this a little bit later, but a lot of some of the bywords or terms that they were used were iron furnace, furnace of affliction, house of bondage. And like I said, we're gonna get into that a little bit later. I just want to just kind of just put that out there right now, that the Egyptians were known by bywords just the same way as the Israelites were and are. The next is sick, not ill. They were going to come into a lot of sicknesses and illnesses. We look at Jeremiah 46:11. It says that there will be many physical ailments and infirmities that their medicines and treatments cannot heal, which is interesting because Egypt is the birthplace of medicine. People say, well, it was what, God, I can't. It's not Hermes. What the hell is his name? Hippocrates or whatever, the guy, the Hippocratic oath or whatever, that said that he was the father. He says that I'm a student of Egypt. I was taught by it. It just, now I'm going. I'll start to go into a rant, but Next section, real quick, is tail, not head. Pretty much, you go into a lot of Christian churches or whatever, they say, I'm the head, not the tail, I'm above, not below, I'm this, that, not this, other side, this, that. And pretty much the opposite of that would be being the tail, not the head. Um, and obviously that was part of Israel's uh, curse or what have you. And we look at Egypt; it's the same thing. Isaiah 19:8-10 states that the fishermen will have no success in catching their fish and will become disheartened. And now, when you look at Egypt, you look at Nile, you know that they relied heavily on the Nile to get all their fish and nutrients and to move, and it was their bloodline. So if you're not able to fish, your whole economy goes down. You become the tail, not the head, things of that nature. Moving a little bit forward, it says there's nothing Egypt can do. All are helpless. The head and the tail, the noble palm branch and the lowly reed. So, pretty much whether you're up, down, if you're one of the good Egyptians or the bad ones or whatever, you're all, everybody getting it. Everybody getting it today, you know. Um, let's see. And it also states in Deuteronomy 28:43, there will be foreigners among them, and they will get stronger and stronger, and the Egyptians, will get weaker and weaker. Um, you know, I'm, it just, I'm just throwing it out there, you know. But even then, when we look at a lot of this stuff, we're seeing a lot of economic conditions that, excuse me, are on par with Israel's. But even then, when we look at it today in modern day blacks and everything, but I can't go into all that. Next section is runners and gunners. Um, Deuteronomy 28:65-67. They will not find peace. They will live in fear everywhere that they go. Their hearts will tremble, and there will be uncertainty for their survival. That was for the Israelites. Um, let's see. And when we look at a prophecy in Jeremiah about the Egyptians, brain fart for a second there. It tells of the strongest, fastest, and mightiest of all the Egyptian warriors would be fleeing for their lives. And here's the thing: when we look at pretty much running and gunning, you're always running, you're always fighting, you're always looking over your shoulder. It's pretty much Europe turns the world into an ancient Europe. Um, it's almost like everybody's looking over their shoulder. Everybody's looking out for their neighbor. Everybody, it's just dog eat dog. And it's I mean, it's pretty much one of those things where is it any coincidence that when we say urban, right, urban communities, a lot of the times we're referring to ghettos. We're referring to a lot of the detestable places that most people don't want to be, but where people of color continually find themselves to be. You know, but I could talk for hours and days about that. Have done it, won't do it here. But we're gonna get into the last section, which is restoration. Um, and I'm going to read from Ezekiel 29:13-14. But this is what the sovereign Lord says: At the end of 40 years, I will bring the Egyptians home again from the nations from which have been scattered. I will restore prosperity of Egypt and bring the people back to the land. And now some people will read that verse and say, see, all that stuff you were talking about, you're right. You know, um, Egypt and Israel, they were in captivity. They were essentially the same, da 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 da. But you know what? After that 40 years, Egypt went back, everything went good. And I'll dare say, it says that God will restore the prosperity of Egypt and bring its people back to the land. Um, Egypt prosperity has not been restored. It hasn't. And as far as the original people that were there that actually built the pyramids and built the Sphinx and everything like that, all those people, they're not the people running the show. So it may have been, okay, yeah, take them back or whatever, but it must be talking about a later date. Maybe, yeah, I can go a little bit deeper into that, but Um, we'll kind of park that there, because I want to get to this part right here, this main verse, and I've already pretty much gone hella over time, but it says, this is Isaiah 19 through 22. In that day there will be an altar to the Lord in the heart of Egypt, and there will be a monument to the Lord at its border. It will be a sign and a witness that the Lord of heaven's armies is worshipped in the land of Egypt. When the people cry to the Lord for help against those who oppress them, he will send them a savior who will rescue them. The Lord will make himself known to the Egyptians. Yes, they will know the Lord and will make their sacrifices and offerings to him. They will make a vow to the Lord and will keep it. The Lord will strike Egypt, and then he will bring healing, for the Egyptians will turn to the Lord, and he will listen to their pleas and heal them. If you took Egypt out and put Israel in, it would have been right on par. People wouldn't have even blinked twice. Because if you look at this thing, if you look at the cycle, right? Israel messes up, they get punished, and God says, "Well, I'm gonna restore everything." And this is what this is. Every time that God talks about restoring something for Israel, they talk about either building a new temple, sending them a savior, making a new covenant, or healing the people in the land. In here, they talked about building an altar, to be at the, to be a testament to God or whatever. They talk about sending them a savior. Talks about healings. Talk about um, all that stuff. Like, it's all here. So if God's saying, I'm going to restore you, I'm going to do temples and this and that, I'm going to do it for Israel and I'm going to do it for you too. There is no one else in the Bible that this is talking about, like that can equate with this. It's not like God's like, okay, Assyrians, I'm gonna do this for you. Babylonians, I'm gonna do this for you. Greeks, I'm gonna do this for you. No, he just says, I'm going to do this for Israel and Egypt. So when we look at this thing, right? Let's bring this home, right? We look at Israel and Egypt. They spent, well, pretty much Israel's entire ancient presence has been intertwined with Egypt. They left together. They ate together. They were in captivity together. They get dispersed together. They speak the same language. They go through the same afflictions. They get the same curses. They get the same everything. They get the same bywords. They get the same now they get the same restoration. They get the same covenants. They get the same savior. They get the same everything. Dare I say it, they are the same people. And we still got like 4 more chapters in this to go. Trust me, we still got some points to make, but um, please, at this point, take it upon yourself, do some personal research in Egypt and Africa, because you'll understand a little bit more about the Bible. And if you're a black person, you'll understand a little bit more about yourself, about that missing piece of history that just kind of gets glossed over. Um, for a lot of people that say, well, I can't, African and this and that because ancestor worship or whatever. Well, if you've bought into this book so far and you believe yourself to be an Israelite or a Jew or one of the people that's, connected to the Bible, then you're already in ancestor, not worship. That's not the word I want to use. You're already given oath to your ancestors. Do the same thing with Egypt, right? And at the same time, you know what? I'll get into that a little bit later. But I'm just gonna read. I'm just gonna read this part right here. Uh, if you can study your own ancestors in the Bible, then surely you can honor the Egyptian ancestors as well, who's made the sacrifices for you to be here. The blood, sweat, tears, oppression, and struggle, pain, sadness, and triumph that had to be laid out by people who look just like you and like the people of the Bible reserved some recognition as well. It is well worth your look at to study Egypt, Africa as a whole, as well as Israel, because you have connected to it all, and biblically speaking, there is now no longer any reason not to. It's almost a requirement now. This is your new commandment. My people perish for lack of knowledge. Get the knowledge, and in Egypt is where you're going to find a lot of this knowledge. And we got 4 more chapters. I'm gonna send you on that. I'm gonna send you on that path. And then there's other people that say, well, the Egypts, they were heathens. I can't, all right, I can give oath to my ancestors or whatever, but the Egyptians, they were heathens. And what does that mean exactly? Well, there were people who they believed in different gods, and their beliefs were weird, and they da 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 da. And I can't get into any of that stuff. And to that person, I would say, well, what do you think the Bible is? What do you think the Old Testament is? Right? The Old Testament was about them serving other gods, about doing stuff they weren't supposed to be doing. Hell, Moses got so pissed he broke tablets and made other ones and stuff like that. Like, what do you think the Bible is? It's like a book of bad shit not to do. So, you might as well learn about other people doing some other stuff that could, help uh, enlighten you. But with that, getting a little heated, a little bit passionate, went hella overtime. Even though I tried to speed through this thing, I'm sorry, but this is a pretty big chapter. But with that, we're gonna go on to the next one, which is chapter 16. Praise Gods, and we're gonna get into it heavy. It's gonna get a lot more heavy from here on out. So with that, I am Raday Leavy. This is Standard Reason, Blacks in the Bible, Facebook, Twitter, all that other good jazz. I will see you at the next video. You have a great day. Peace.